All right. We are still in the first rule out of 8 rules in this small beneficial booklet, Qawa Muhimmah, crucial rules about blasphemy. And under the first rule, we reach the point, the first rule, which is denying what is known in the religion by necessity. So, we talked about the case of denying the most basic fundamentals of the religion that are known by necessity. The most basic, non-detailed meaning of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. No one is God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This is blasphemy for anyone. No one's excused here. None of the sane pubescent people are excused. Then, there is also basic beliefs that are known in the religion by necessity, but not as basic as what I just mentioned to you. Rather, these basic beliefs are built on what I just mentioned to you, like believing in angels and paradise and hell. Then, if someone denies that, he will be a blasphemer unless he's a new Muslim or like a new Muslim. Then, there are cases that are definitely correct in the religion, and they are a case of consensus, so they must not be denied. However, they are not known in the religion by necessity, meaning many Muslims don't know about them. And therefore, if someone denies them, then we don't deem him as a kafir unless he's being stubborn. Here is not a condition, the condition is not so tight that he has to be a new Muslim or like a new Muslim. Now, even if he's an old Muslim, we won't deem him as a kafir as long as he's not being stubborn. And now the Shaykh wants to address the issue of misconstruing, meaning misunderstanding religious cases. And we started this. Meaning, when we talk about misconstruing religious cases, what we are saying is that a person wanted to get to the truth, but he missed it, and he arrived at falsehood. Is his wanting to arrive at the truth and trying to arrive at the truth, is that enough to save him from falling into blasphemy when he misses the target and he falls into blunder? In the religion, there's details. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And that's what we want to understand here. When would a person's blunder be the kind that does not demand of us to deem him as a kafir? And when would it be the kind that demands of us to deem him as a kafir? So, when his blunder does not pertain to the obvious definitive matters, then we won't deem him as a kafir. What's an example of not pertaining to the obvious definitive matters? Like what we saw about those who denied the zakat at the time of Abu Bakr. They didn't deny it fundamentally altogether. Rather, they believed that the obligation stopped by the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of the ayah خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. O Muhammad, take from their monies an obligatory charity, purifying them, and pray for them. So they said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the one commanded to take our zakat in this ayah and to pray for us when we hand it over. So now the Prophet has passed away, alayhi salatu wassalam, and this is therefore no longer applicable. How could he collect our zakat if he has passed away? And how will he pray for us uh, when we hand it over to him if he has passed away? So the Sahaba did not deem these ones as blasphemers for this blunder. Or another example is those who, at the time of Umar, they misunderstood the ayah. فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. Are you going to desist? Are you going to stop drinking? In the form of a question. The ayah is posed in the form of a question. They didn't understand that this is a prohibition, though it really is. It didn't appear to them that this question is forbidding them. Yani is not here. The question is, are you going to or you're not going to? Which do you choose to do? Whatever you want, do as you wish. Rather, it means stop. Are you going to stop? So they didn't understand. So they didn't believe in the prohibition of wine. And they drank it, legalizing it. Omar did not deem them as apostates for legalizing wine, but he still whipped them for drinking it, and he gave the command to execute them if they legalize it after this, because now the religious rule is clear for them. If they legalize it after that, then it's going to be a case of being stubborn. Then that would be the blasphemy, kufrul inad, the blasphemy of obstinacy, stubbornness. Okay. And I gave you some examples that are blasphemy, and one's blunder does not save him from blasphemy. His blunder is blasphemy, such as those, what the Shaykh has here is the example of that Muslim grave robber, according to one way of interpreting its hadith. According to one way of interpreting his hadith, he said in that hadith, when he was on his deathbed, لَإِنْ قَدَرَ اللَّهُ عَلَيَّ لَيُعَذِّبُنِي, etc. If Allah has power over me, He will torture me. So what's the meaning of if? Is he not sure? Does he doubt that Allah has power over him? So, now as for the man in the actual story, it's confirmed that he died as a believer. So, how did he die as a believer? Depends on how you interpret his statement. It can be interpreted in more than one way. It doesn't have to be interpreted to mean that he was doubting about God's power. And amongst the interpretations of that is that he was hysterical, he was delirious, he was panicking, he was on his deathbed, and he was horrified of being punished by Allah. So when someone is like that, and take note of this, maybe you need it someday, whether for something you witness or for helping another person to know the rule. When a person is like that, delirious, hysterical, he might talk like someone whose tongue is slipping. He might talk like someone who's out of his mind. He's not realizing what's running off of his tongue. And then we would judge him like someone who has a slip of the tongue. Or we would judge him like someone who says, Wallahi, habitually. And he doesn't really mean to bind himself to something. Wallahi, wallahi. That's one way to explain it. And there are other ways to explain it. But for sure, he died as a believer because in the end of the story, it's mentioned that Allah forgave him. So he must have been a believer. So why is this relevant in what we are saying? Because some person misunderstood the hadith, and he used the hadith as evidence to say that that doubting about God's power over everything while being ignorant is excused. That's how he understood the hadith. He thought it was evidence that doubting God's power over everything while ignorant is excusable. That is itself blasphemy. That blunder that he committed, that he inferred from the hadith, is blasphemy. So, doubting God's power over everything, that's blasphemy, inexcusable blasphemy, ignorant or not. And we gave references for that. Ibn al-Jawzi said so, and others. Ibn al-Jawzi said, indeed, denying that Allah has power over everything is blasphemy by consensus. And others said so too. What else? Also, someone who reads in the book of Allah and arrives at the conclusion that Allah has body parts and limbs, and that He is some entity filling a space, moving about, that's blasphemy, although one used verses of the Quran to arrive at this blunder, and he's not excused, even if he were trying to arrive at the truth. Or another example, someone used some ayah or hadith and arrived at the conclusion that the world has no beginning. This is unexcusable blasphemy. He said, for example, well, yeah, there's this hadith, كان الله ولم يكن شيء غيره, Allah was and there wasn't anything else. But there's another hadith, another version, كان الله قبل كل شيء. It means Allah existed before everything. كان الله ولم يكن قبله شيء, rather. He says, but look, here's another version of the hadith. كان الله ولم يكن قبله شيء. Allah was, and there wasn't anything before Him. He says, look here, there wasn't anything before Him. That doesn't itself deny that there was something with Him. In eternity, there was some kind of thing with Him in eternity. Some kind of thing, even if before that there was another kind of thing, but there was always some kind of thing in eternity. This is blasphemy, unexcusable blasphemy. And that's the blunder of Ibn Taymiyyah. And also, I gave you the example of those who believe that no believer is punished. They denied that Allah punishes believers. And they used as evidence for that the saying of Allah, وَهَلْ نُجَازِي إِلَّا الْكَفُورِ. Or is that a fat there? Now I don't recall if there's fat or fahal or wahal. And the meaning of the ayah is, would we punish anyone but the blasphemer? So they said, here, Allah doesn't punish anyone but a blasphemer. We're going to say to them, this blunder of yours is blasphemy. Now, if you were curious and said, clarify for me why he falls into blasphemy here. Why is this something unexcusable? Although he found an ayah, you might say, yeah, I completely agree, it's wrong. Yes, for sure, Allah punishes believers. But this one, why his case is blasphemy for sure? You didn't say it about some others, like the people who denied the zakat and others. My answer to this question is that the Prophet ﷺ, he made takfir on them because he foretold their appearance. He deemed them as blasphemers before they appeared. He said, صنفان من أمتي ليس لهما نصيب في الإسلام القدرية والمرجئة. Two groups from my nation have no share in Islam: the destiny deniers and the exonerators. The exonerators means those who pardon every believer, meaning they believe that there is no believer who would receive any punishment from Allah. The Prophet himself deemed them as blasphemers, and so we don't have any room to say otherwise. Alayhi salatu wassalam. Okay, let's continue reading here. The Shaykh says, Rahimahullah, the second category is what is not known in the religion by necessity. So now you already know the status of denying what is not known in the religion by necessity. One does not blaspheme for that unless he's being stubborn. Whether it were a case of consensus or not. But here, whether it were a case of consensus or not, this is important to understand too. If it's not a case of consensus, this means that the scholars have differed about it. The qualified mujtahid scholars, the supreme judges who are mujtahids, their verdicts are like a religious evidence for the layman. We're allowed to take what they say and go by it. When they differ, then there's no reason to bring up blasphemy anyway. A Shafi'i said something and the others said something else, or two out of three of them said something like this, or some of the imams said something and some of them said something else. Is the woman's iddah, for example, her countdown, is it 3 menstrual cycles or 3 non-bleeding cycles? Is it this way or is it that way? They differed about it. So why are we talking about this in the topic of blasphemy? It's not blasphemy to say one way or the other here. There's two sayings. Either you're going to say her countdown is 3 menstrual cycles, or you're going to say her countdown is 3 non-menstruating intervals. There's no blasphemy here if you say either of those. That's not consensus. But what about if it is consensus? If it is a case of consensus, then it means it's definitely correct. And if it's definitely correct, then if someone denies something that's definitely true in the religion, is he a kafir? Not if it's not known in the religion by necessity, because then many people don't know it, even though it's definitely correct. I think this is clear. If you have any question, feel free, please. Okay. Anyone who denied a rule agreed upon from this category is not deemed a disbeliever. This category of what is not known in the religion by necessity. Yes. Whether a prohibition, yani whether that's something haram, a legalization, yani something permissible, or an obligation, or a sanctioning, meaning something that's religiously legitimate, even if the scholars differed about it, unless he actually knows the religious judgment and he still rejects it. That's called stubbornness. However, he is still committing a major sin for going against the consensus of the nation. Yes. Going against the consensus is the doorway of being a deviant. Didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, "Kulluha fin nari illa wahida"? all of those groups, all of those factions are in hell but one. This hadith proves the consensus. All of those groups out of the 73 are in hell but one. 72 out of 73 groups will be in hell but one. Why? Because this one, what made this one what it is? Something that they all agreed about. They all together agreed about. And what made those 72 different from that one? They disagreed with what all of those ones in that one group agreed about. So you don't want to be there. You don't want to be the one who is going against the consensus of the nation. Don't deny something that you don't know. Just say, I don't know. And the Shaykh gives an example that we mentioned already. That would be like someone who legalizes shaking hands with marriageable women without desire and without a barrier. We're not going to call him a kafir. He shook a woman's hand without a barrier. And then he said to him, bro, that's haram. You can't do like that. He says, what? You say, you can't shake her hand without a barrier like that. Just skin on skin. That's haram. He says, why? That's not haram. And you say, yes, it is. You can't touch that woman like that. And he'll say, but there is no desire here. It's just a handshake. So you're going to say to him, listen, I have learned. And I know that many people don't know this rule. And that's why I know better than to deem you as a kafir here. But at least I can warn you from committing a major sin of contradicting the consensus. Don't say what you are saying. This is haram. You don't have any evidence that it's not haram. Then if he says, well, what's the evidence that it's haram? Then we can produce the hadiths about that prove that it's haram. The hadiths about shaking a woman's hand in particular, as well as the hadiths about touching a woman in general. Or the Shaykh gives another example. Privacy with a woman, not for a sin. Privacy with a woman, not for a sin. Like maybe he doesn't know that he can't be on the elevator with her. Didn't occur to him. The woman stepped on the elevator, then he stepped in the elevator and the door closed. Say, bro, get out of there. And then when you saw him later, you say to him, you can't be in there with her like that. He says, what? What's haram about that? I'm just going home. I'm just going up to the other floor. Say to him, this is not permissible. Don't deny that this is haram. You can't be alone with a woman. He says, it's just an elevator, bro. You tell him, yeah, okay, yeah, and he's elevator, room, closet, what you want. You can't be alone with her. Even though you didn't have desire. So he denied that due to his ignorance that the sacred law prohibited that, then we will not deem him as a kafir. You said even with security cameras in the elevator? I haven't learned anything about the cameras in this case. Okay. Yeah. Let a person be precautious here in the meantime. How does he know somebody is watching him anyway? How does he even know someone's watching him? Just because there's a camera there. How does he know the camera's even on? Maybe there's a red dot there. So the light is on, camera's on. How does he know someone's watching him? Yani, how many movies we saw where the security guard is not looking at the monitor? MashaAllah. Now, since we are here, the Shaykh talks about the case of taking any valid ijtihad. It's permissible to take any valid ijtihad of a mujtahid. But notice this word valid here. Any valid ijtihad that qualifier has an implication. The implication being that as if there is something called an invalid ijtihad, and that is the case. It's understood by this qualifier valid that there's another kind of ijtihad, which is an invalid one, and that's true. There is such a thing. You can't follow an invalid ijtihad. And so, when you learn about the different sayings of the scholars, the mujtahids, even talking about mujtahids, still be on your toes. Still be cautious. Still remember that you will be responsible for yourself on Resurrection Day. If you take a saying that's inapplicable, you'll still be sinful. Like some mujtahids said, you can drink an amount of intoxicating date-soaked water, not wine, an amount of intoxicating date-soaked water that doesn't intoxicate. A non-intoxicating amount of intoxicating date-soaked water. Some scholars said you can consume that. That's wrong. Do it and be sinful. Do it, you'll be sinful. And yani, some people, if they find anything, they're going to do what they want to do. What does that mean? It means if you have water and you put dates in the water and you let the dates soak in the water and you leave it there for more than 3 days, then this water could become intoxicating. Okay. But what if you just poured out a little bit, like a capful or just a palmful? Not enough to get you intoxicated. The drink is intoxicating, but the amount that you drink is not enough to intoxicate you. Some scholars said about intoxicating date-soaked water, not wine. That's different. Wine is different. Some of them said about this intoxicating date-soaked water that if you consume a non-intoxicating amount, that it's not haram. Do it if you dare. You're going to be sinful. It's against the evidence. This saying is against the evidence. Let's read and see what the Shaykh has. He says, concerning what is differed about in this category amongst the Imams, any layman who takes a saying of any Imam over another does not blaspheme. Yes. Yani blaspheme is not an issue here. Blasphemy is not an issue here. That is like Umrah. Some Imams said it is obligatory on the able one. And some said that it is not obligatory. So whichever way you take, you don't blaspheme. So there is no burden on anyone who took either of these two sayings, unless his conviction is that the sacred law makes Umrah obligatory, unless that's his conviction. Not that he's just a layman looking to see what the scholars said, and then it reaches him that some imams said this and some imams said that, and he says, okay. Rather, if his case is that he personally, despite what any imam says, he believes personally that it is obligatory, and then he denies it. He believes that it is the law, that it's obligatory, and then he denies that obligation, then he blasphemes. Or, if he believes that the sacred law did not make it obligatory, and despite that he deems it obligatory, then he does blaspheme. Now he's being stubborn. Kufrul inad, the blasphemy of obstinacy. He would then blaspheme because of his contradicting the religion. Okay, you said, what about the ayah in the Quran in the story of Moses where that grandee of Pharaoh said about Musa while warning the people and Pharaoh, if it is a lie, then the lie is upon him. But if he's telling the truth, then you'll be afflicted with some of the torture that he promises. And that man warning them was a believer. There's no blasphemy here. Because when he says if it's a lie, it means supposing. Supposing it's a lie, then his lie would be upon him. But supposing he's telling the truth, then such and such. This is not haram way to speak. You can say to a person, okay, if we suppose there is an eternal being with power to bring entities into existence from nothingness. If that's the case, then, and then you go on from there, there's no blasphemy here. And you say, but if we suppose that there is no eternal being with the power to bring things forth from nothingness, then it would mean such and such. So there's no blasphemy here. Is that clear for you? Said it seems like that goes against Ijtihad. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it's just merely supposing. It's making a rational argument only. It's valid to make a rational argument, which is to establish your premises and then come to a conclusion. This is what he was doing. He was establishing premises. If it's a lie, then such and such. And if it's true, then such and such. You're welcome. This is because the way to know the derivative rules, this means the derivative rules? Derivative? It's supposed to be derivative, the derivative rules. This means the rules that branch off. They branch into details. The way to know those rules, those derivative rules of the religion is merely, meaning only, by hearing them and by their transmission, nothing more. Didn't we say in the previous lesson that the lawful and the unlawful and the religiously legitimate and the obligatory, etc., and the disliked, all of that is by the religion and not by our minds. There is no other way to arrive at these rules but by hearing them. Because the good is what the sacred law deems good, and the ugly is what the sacred law deems ugly. We covered that. What's the judgment of Abraham attempting to sacrifice his son? Good. What's the judgment of Abraham having relations with a slave woman? Good. And his baby from her is lawful, legitimate child. And what's the judgment of slavery? Valid. There's rules for it. And in fact, there's a need for it. And like this. Indeed, had Allah not made a single thing obligatory on us, it would be true that not a single thing would be obligatory on us. Like the animals. They don't have any obligations or prohibitions. And had He not forbidden a single thing, then not a single thing would be forbidden for us. Then not a single thing would be forbidden for us, and not a single thing would be a reason to be tortured in the afterlife. For indeed, far from imperfection is He, and highly exalted. He rules as He wills, and He does as He wills. He has neither a compeller, nor a motivator, nor a resort. He has neither a compeller, yani no one forces Him to do anything, nor a motivator. No one gives Him reason for doing something or not. Nor does He have a resort, somewhere that He seeks for protection or shelter. So anyone who believed that a rule did come in the religion, and despite that he denied it, then he does indeed blaspheme, whether he were a misconstruer or not. Yani, he believed this rule came in the religion, Even if it didn't come in the religion, but he believed that it did, and then he denied it, then he's a kafir. And whether this rule were a matter of consensus or not, yani, if the scholars differed about it, then it's not blasphemy to take one way or another. But he believes that it is the rule of the religion, so he denied it, then he blasphemes. Whether it were known in the religion by necessity or not. And concerning anyone unaware of the religious rule. Okay, let's get down to this second rule, inshallah. Let's finish this first rule now. Concerning anyone unaware of the religious rule, the true religious rule about some case, in some case or another, meaning that he did not know the religious rule about it, so he believed that its rule is contrary to what it really is. And he has a blunder, a misconception. Or he said something different from what is correct because of his ignorance of the rule. And he thinks what he is saying is the religious rule. He thinks that what he is saying is the religious rule, not because he wants to reject it or to be stubborn. Then he is not deemed as a disbeliever. And like him is someone who learned the religious rule but then forgot. He learned the case, but he forgot it. So he thought it is different from how it is, whether it were known by necessity in the religion or not. So he heard that there's a prophet called Ilyas, but then he forgot. So he denied it. Then we're not going to rush to deem him as a kafir. Wallahu alam, Allah knows best. So now we're ready to start this second rule next time, inshallah. Do you have any question I can answer for you? Yes, go ahead, please. How come Abraham's son wasn't born a slave if his mom was a slave? Because his father was the master. The kuffar are the ones who have babies with their slave women and then make their own babies slaves too. That's his baby. It's not going to be a slave. When the father is other than the master, then the baby will be born a slave. That's why it's haram to marry a slave woman. Because if she has a baby, her master will own your baby. Unless you have an excuse, yani. You can't marry a slave woman unless you have an excuse. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khayra.